Today I'll look at BIOS levels. I will point out that this article still applies. So setting up the boot media that both machines are going to boot off of, all of that is covered here, including Rufus to use to create the DOS bootable media. All right, I also mentioned that you want the BIOS in UEFI mode. In my case, I just want to show you I have a 2 GHz Xeon D1540 on the left and a Xeon D1541 at the right. That is slightly faster, like maybe 5% tops. Okay, I have BIOS 1.0b on the left and 1.0c on the right. Now, machines that started shipping this week and the last week of February into early March here, those Xeon D1541 systems shipped with 1.0c. Now, going back to factory faults, no big deal. I have this article here already that kind of lays out, not just kind of lays out, it has all the details, or just a video you can literally just play and follow along with in real time to set up your BIOS the way you like it. So I'm going to go ahead and restore optimize defaults, because I have a bunch of testing to do today. I'm not saying you need to do that necessarily. Okay, so now I can go and save the changes and reset and make sure to hit F11 at boot so that I can select boot media. And in this case, that's going to be SanDisk USB flash drives that I've inserted physically into the super servers. Now, DOS boots insanely fast. Doesn't really matter if you use USB 2 or 3. I happen to be using a USB 3 flash drive and the USB 2 port on the front of the super server. So again, this video is really focused on showing you what the update process is like going from 10b to 11 and 10c to 11. 1.1 is not yet publicly available on Supermicro site. So at this moment in time, if you go and look for the BIOS, this is what you get, which is 10b. So that's expected to change very soon when you go to the motherboard or the server and click on BIOS. We should have a download that everyone can use for either version of their server. Okay, I didn't have to hit F1 on that one, or F11. I was too busy talking, but on this one I may have some other drives in there. So hit F11. Interesting. It didn't work out so well. So let's have a look at what went wrong on the right and see if that might help you if you run into the same sort of problem moving along from 10c. I should point out that this might be a pre-release 1.0c and it might be a pre-release 1.1. I don't actually know if I'm using GA level code. And I don't have any place to get GA level 1.0c other than it was preloaded on this loaner system I have showing on the right, the Xeon D1541. That's featured in numerous articles where I tested out SRIOV and so forth. All right, so I'm going to go into the BIOS on both machines. So I hit delete. And let's have a look at the boot screen here. So it's in dual mode, and then a whole bunch of devices show as bootable. Machine on the right is dual mode as well. But for some reason, the BIOS never shows SanDisk, it only shows the UEFI version. Okay, it's looking better now, but it's still acting different than the one on the left. And it keeps booting to the NVMe Windows instance. So there's a GPU in there and there's an M.2 in there. I don't know if any of those are relevant, but an interesting thing to try will be to pop those out and to swap the boot media and see if I'm still struggling on the right. So I'll be right back to Time to grab a screwdriver. All right, I made the changes. There's now no boot media on the right. And obviously, again, no issue on the left. Not sure what to make of all this, but the possibility of a difference in behavior this significant, it's a little annoying. So I think going forward, I'll just need to recommend to everyone, hey, go to 1.1 so we have a common experience. They're both in dual. There's now no drives installed in either system. If we go to this menu, what do we see? A large difference in the number of enumerated drives. While I was taking a little lunch break, I kind of thought about it, remembering, hey, I've had trouble booting before, and that's right there in my Nutanix article. Let me bring that up for you here. So, Nutanix, getting started and booting from USB. Eric in Brazil of Zenet blog purchased this server and had trouble booting off of USB media. And it turns out it was simply this, CSM support. All right, so watch what happens. I'm going to show you. I'm going to say, restore optimized defaults. On the left, notice at the top 1540 and then 1541 on the right. Let's do the same thing. Restore optimized defaults. Excellent. Now go to security, and what do you see? It's disabled on the right. So I was dead in the water. Right here. There was no way it was going to boot. So this is a rather important change they made in that BIOS upgrade, and I think that's going to bite people. So I'm glad I stumbled across this. I feel highly confident what I just did is going to fix the issue entirely. So now, without hitting any keys, I'm simply going to lay my hands off and watch a successful boot off of the USB flash drive. And what it should be doing is booting the SanDisk flash drive DOS media in legacy mode automatically with any luck. In other words, it should work as supported OS. I'll also point out that Rufus does not let you create DOS media and anything but the MBR that's compatible with legacy or UEFI BIOS. So I'll just point that out. Rufus keeps you out of trouble. Okay, as expected, command line on the left, and very soon I should have command line on the right as well. After you go to factory defaults, I've seen it take longer, so I'm not concerned. All right, there we go. All right, not a big fan of caps lock shipping. Off by default, on by default, I turn it off in the BIOS, but you know I'm at factory default, right? So it's on over there. There we go. And that's exactly the reason I don't like it on by default. And it'll actually mess with your system even if there's IKVM viewers in the background window. As you're typing some other place in your PC, you'll get that numlock problem. All right, so how do you do it? I'll use cap. Type X, hit tab, and autocomplete should do its thing. So that was suspiciously fast on the left. I'm going to hit delete key and go in and see that it's still at 10B, likely, since it certainly did not do this routine. I'm going to have to rewind and go back and look at the video to see exactly why. So I've now hit delete key to get into setup. And we're still at 0B. Hit escape, quit without saving. We're back at a command line. Okay, so the script actually had 2 steps to it. And you saw it copying a file and changing auto exec, so that was interesting. And now it's proceeding without incident. Yeah, that was weird. So I'm thinking, what if I was on a USB attached, I don't know, DVD-ROM, read-only media? Well, whatever, it did work, or it appears to be working. So let that be a lesson to you. Maybe someone watching this video will have a 10B machine, and they will find it takes 2 reboots, or 2 boots off the boot media to get the BIOS upgraded. Whereas 10C on the right, it seems to be a single boot or one-hop operation. Okay, both have completed. I've now boldly either bricked both of my systems, or my system is one on the left and loaner on the right, or everything's fine, but notice it's telling me I got to power off. Now for the convenience of recording on video, I'm going to do it this way. And let's see what happens. We'll know from the BIOS screen on the BIOS when I get in, hitting delete, if I was successful or not. Okay, it already looks different. The IPMI IP address shows. I love that. So that's the first change I noticed right there. That is an awesome feature. Supermicro is not big on release notes. All right, I'll just say that. Yeah, which is a bit frustrating. I have a video walkthrough for all the differences in the BIOS of the 1540 versus 1541. And now with BIOS level 1.1, well, things have changed again. I don't want to mislead folks into you believing that you're looking at the final 1.1 code on the right, because I do not know that yet. Excuse me, on the right or the left. It was just way longer. All right, success. Now, this is kind of the drumroll moment. Yeah, I've got a difference in memory. That is true. I probably should have popped out 2 DIMMs to make this apples to apples, but whatever. That's a very small difference. They're the same model memory DIMM, just 2 of 32 gig on the left and 4 times 32 gig on the right. All right, let's move along. I'm going to do the BIOS tour because I successfully got through the BIOS upgrade, which is what this video was intended to show, how to do it. Now that I'm done with that, I want to make sure all the features are the same on both systems, because I'm not going to have both systems forever. It's a temporary luxury of having both machines in front of me, and I'm making the most of it. Okay, so this screen appears unchanged, and I'm going to just proceed like that. I'm probably going to speed up the video now, and you're going to just need to pause at whatever spot. There's not really much voiceover narration needed for the rest of this. Just whipping through, so screenshots could be grabbed later if needed. Okay, I got to the very last screen and I noticed a difference. Now I'm going to point out that I'm booted with the SanDisk on the rear and the one on the right, and on the front and the one on the left. Alright, so I don't want to conclude anything. I'm going to simply rip out the extra DIMMs on the right and put the USB over in the front and make sure the two machines are absolutely identical. So again, I got to the very last screen where things differed. We also know IPMI differs between the two, but that's a different issue. This is just the BIOS I'm focused on at the moment. Okay, I'll be right back. Alright, so they both have 64 gig of memory now. And hitting escape on the left, going back to the boot screen, are the machines identical now? That wasn't it. It was this screen. Okay. Not sure what to make of that. So, I don't know. How about I discard changes and exit on both? So that's the second boot. The first boot after you do a restore factory defaults can be a little funny, especially when it comes to HCI devices. You saw I had no hard drives attached, so that's not the issue here. But I intentionally now am in a second boot situation on both systems. And I just want to see if that very slight discrepancy on the very last BIOS screen now goes away. But this is extremely reassuring. I like the behavior. And actually, I'm just going to roll with it. This can become a kind of a long video, but I'm going to do the recommended BIOS settings. And it's very handy that I have just a video to follow along with. So it won't take long to set that up. Benchmarking, it's a little faster, maybe 5%. But you turn off CSM and then you won't be able to boot off of flash drives and stuff. So I'm going to go with recommended settings as I finish up this video. And I want to see if there's any significant differences that would require me to, redo those. Okay, I'm in. Left arrow, no difference in behavior. It's got the same double UEFI built-in shell. Okay, now there are new DIMMs support for 2400 for the machine on the right. The Xeon D1541 should support 2400. I suspect they might work on the left, who knows? But at least now we know we have a BIOS on both of them. The hardware Rev 2 motherboard on the right versus the hardware Rev 1.02 motherboard on the left, that's probably the difference. And indeed, you can use DDR3 memory on the right. So yeah, I guess it wouldn't be surprising if only the 2400 only gets recognized with the machine on the right, the newer Xeon D. But I don't really know. I wouldn't know until I tried it. I haven't seen anyone buy it and try those yet. Okay, time to follow along with this video. Okay, the gig showing on that screen went away, I noticed. And I've got a little problem with visibility here. Okay, the video is showing to restore optimized defaults. You already saw me do that earlier in the video. So I'm going to zoom forward a little here to the second boot where all the configuration happens. Okay, turning off numlock on both. And I'm about to change from instant off to 4 seconds and then restore. Well, if I have a ice storm, power outage, I got to use generator, all that stuff. I want control. I don't want power to automatically go on. So for my home lab situation, I do like the 4 seconds and I like it to stay off so I can power up when I have good UPS batteries. stay off. All right, so we're done there. Now going to say to config. In my case, I'm using NVMe storage, so I have no drives to set here. I'll let it play out because it's almost done. All right. So yeah, you want to go through and look for all your SSDs and change them to SSD type. I haven't actually seen a speed difference really, but haven't tested it too terribly carefully either. So now we're headed to PCIe. So I'm going to leave it at factory defaults. Notice those video cards, those NICs went away again. So it's weird that that screen disappeared. So notice I'm changing very, very little. Basically power on behaviors and a bit of numlock stuff. Okay, and I do put you in UEFI mode. I don't like to accidentally end up with a kind of legacy system where you have a hard drive that you can't use in the UEFI future that we're all headed toward inevitably anyway. So I tend to turn on UEFI here, and the screen just told you why, the reasons why. All right, and then for boot order, my video is pointing out that if you're doing something like flashing a firmware, it can be good to have, or sorry, in my case, ESXi, excuse me, which works fine with UEFI SanDisk. That's where you want to save settings and exit. And then you see in the video it shows VMware's ESXi coming up. So I'm done with following along with these directions. We already know what this boot looks like and that the BMC, or Baseboard Management Controller, part of IPMI, is showing on the main splash screen even with the Supermicro logo. The next one I'm going to say turn off quiet boot. I want to see behind the Supermicro logo what the boot looks like with this new BIOS 1.1, if they've made any changes. So I'll go ahead and speed this up again. Okay, we're back. Going into boot feature and quiet boot disabled. Okay, and then hit F4 and F4, save configuration and exit. Let's get a little reboot going here. Okay, so how it looks, it shows memory speed and it shows gigahertz. So that's it. Now it's time to put some hard drives in and get an operating system going. One more article to point out would be this first look that I had does mention IPMI and that there's differences. So I walked the user through an extensive video that shows a bunch of pictures that show stuff, and then finally I actually document BIOS and IPMI. And I do not have a new IPMI. I also talk a little bit about RAID in there. If you have multiple drives in there, you get RAID options. So that would be the next frontier to look at, and I should probably just tack that onto this video, so I think I'll keep rolling. I'll need to add multiple hard drives in there, but before I slip 2 hard drives in each system, minimum, to get any kind of RAID configuration, I'll point out it's no longer Control-I. It's in the BIOS, so you're going to see that soon. Now, here we go. IPMI. I'm going to need to refresh that screen because my BIOS has changed. So let's see if the BIOS becomes 1, 2. Yeah, there we go. I've got LastPass auto login this thing back in. And never mind, it wasn't auto, but that's okay. There we go, BIOS 1.1. Okay, and then this one's BIOS 1.1. But the firmware, the IPMI part, is very different. So just pointing that out. And then Redfish, whatever that is. I looked that up. I forget what that means. So not too much to show you there today. It's just simply tying to power them both off and get a couple drives in there and then resume this video. Okay, I've rebooted and I've put some drives in there as promised. And there we go. 1, 2, 3 drives. 1, 2, 3 drives recognized in both. If I hit up arrow, nope, you're not missing anything at the bottom there. Port 5 is nothing. All right, but here's the screen we really want. Turn on RAID. Now, I want to show you something here. Notice how they both look the same here. Interesting. Little difference there, not sure why. Anyhow, well, there is a little difference. So I've got different brands of drives, fine. Each has 3, fine. An SSD and 2 spinny drives. But what's different about the machine on the right is that I have 2 NVMe drives in there. Samsung 950 Pro M.2 drives. One a little $20 Lycom PCI adapter that just passes the signal through and runs it at full speed, and the other laying down on the motherboard in the native M.2 slot. So anyhow, why am I doing that? Well, I tried in 103 RAID, just in case for some reason the Intel RST-E that's in these systems would actually support RAIDing NVMe, and the answer is no. Now, if I had HCI models, like SM951 still, and I did test those for a little bit, I probably could RAID them. 2 of them anyway. But as far as full whole hog speed NVMe, I'm quite happy with my 950s, even if I can't RAID them, of course. Ooh, Control-I came back. This is really weird. That was gone in 10C. Control-I was missing. So let me see if the old way is in there. You go into the BIOS, you go into Advanced, and I've got a detail in one of my articles, but there you go. Say to RAID, you have legacy. So if we go to EFI, I believe it shows it back in the BIOS again. Let me show you. I've got a screenshot of that. So remember those articles I had up? First look at the 1541. I've got some RAID screenshots. There we go. So right here on the advanced page, you'd see the Intel RST show up if you're in UEFI. So do we see such a thing here? No, they've just blanked everything out down there. All right, so let me not fight it, and let's just check it out. I didn't really need to do the macro. I could have just hit F4. Oh well. Or exit without saving changes. All right, so on the left, this is all the usual stuff. Create a RAID volume, name it something. And this has been the same for years. Control-I interface. And I don't actually want to RAID those drives. I have some data on one of them, and just kind of inconvenient for me. But people ask about RAID. Yeah, you're not going to be doing this with an ESXi. So VMware ESXi has never been compatible with Intel RST because it requires a Windows driver to activate this chip on the motherboard. So it's very tied to the motherboard. You can't remove the card. And yeah, it's handy in Windows. But you can also do software RAID in a lot of NAS software, Linuxes, or Windows these days too. So I also found rebuild times in RST to be incredibly long. So I'm not a big fan anymore. I've used it on a gaming machine, and really bad idea, because if you had an RST problem when transporting a machine or whatever, for it to clean up could take hours. Not cool. Okay, I successfully got in, and you'll see there's no difference. So the NVMe drives are completely transparent. They're not going to be controlled by the SATA chipset. So this Intel RST-E Enterprise up there is not going to do it. The ROM looks to be the same. So old motherboard and new. I don't. Now that I'm kind of done showing you stuff, I don't see any reason you'd be, jealous of someone with the new motherboard who's getting maybe 5% boost, especially in a home lab situation. All right. So what did I promise I'm going to do? I promised I'm going to go into the SATA config and go here. And let's see how that changes things. Okay, F4, enter, F4, enter. Now I'm just going to let it keep recording all through the BIOS process because I want to see, does Control I show up at all at any point? Or is it all now in the BIOS? Stand by. Okay, so Control I does seem to have gone poof. And yes, it moved here. So now you configure your RAID array from here instead. Pick your drives, mark them, create a RAID volume. And multi-select which drives are members. So that's the gist of it. Same behavior over here on the right? Yes. And NVMe drive Samsung 950 Pro is still missing. They don't show anywhere in the BIOS. Nor would they because they're not HCI controlled. They're not part of the SATA 6 or the 6 SATA 3 ports that the Intel Xeon D1500 chipset is controlling. They're right on the PCI bus. So yeah, you wouldn't see them here. All right. So that's it for the look at RAID. I think the last piece will be to go back to giving you a little tip. Back to here. So let's go to boot feature. No. Where is it? PCIe. This screen. My videos are focused on the easiest way to get going with your super server and the minimal changes to the BIOS, but I will confess that if I'm not using Pixie Boot or any kind of boot from LAN, whoa, okay. Let me think about that. Yeah, I just want to turn this off. So it's one less screen flashy thing happening when you first turn on the system. Notice iSCSI was there, so that's mighty appealing if you want that. But in my case, I'm not doing any of that in my home lab, so I leave that off. All right, now for turning on CSM, you have to mess with this stuff, legacy, and turning these settings to UEFI and turning off CSM. It's just a bit messy. I have a video that already covers that, an article. It talks about benchmarking setup of the BIOS. Now, turning off boot from LAN stuff along with boot feature, quiet boot re-enabled. You'll be able to see. I'm going to leave it off on the right and leave quiet boot on the left. And you can compare and contrast as those things boot up. And you'll also see a little less kind of flicker or jumping over to the boot from LAN stuff happening. So it's just a cleaner boot the way I just configured things. Whether you have the BIOS of the Supermicro quiet boot as seen on the left or you don't. I like turning off boot from LAN. Saves a little bit of time too in the boot process. Okay, I accidentally swapped the two machines, so the 1541 is now on the right, 1540 on the left, but it doesn't matter, they looked identical, right? All right, and then we have Windows booting off of NVMe on the right on the newer machine, and there we go. At incredible speeds. MS-Info32 is going to show that new BIOS we got there, 1.1, and that's significant. Why? Because I'm about to show you. Let's see what happens when I search for that. Not much. That didn't work out too well. Okay, the very first mini tower of any make or model that makes any sense in home lab with good grunt speed and lots of network interfaces is this machine. Originally it said 10C. That did not last. They've already fixed that, and it no longer says rack mount. It says tower, and it says 1.1. So when you click on that link and go right off to to VMware site. There you go. We're on the list with this BIOS level that I just chose. So that means that ESXi 6 that we saw booting there, update 1B, should look clean in the hardware config. So let me have a look over there and tell you what the heck I mean by hardware config. What I mean is hardware monitoring, the hypervisor, ESXi. By default, just install it. No special SIM modules or anything to add on. The only thing you could add on to both Windows or VMware would be 10 gig drivers for the X552 chipset. But that aside, you're good to go with Windows or VMware. Or boot from NVMe on Red Hat or SUSE work too. So I've tried a lot of OSs on this system with NVMe boot, and it all just works great. Okay, so now we have VMware up. There's our summary screen. There's our machine, 2 gigahertz, 1540. And what I really want to go to is configuration, health status. So we have to wait a little while. Thing just booted. No, it's looking good. Fan speeds, all that good stuff showing. So things are very healthy. These are part of the reasons that it's on the list, is that you can monitor these components and they work just great out of the box, including NVMe storage. So we're done. Yeah, there's my fans spinning and all that, 3,000 RPMs. If we load it up, that number will go up and so forth. So I think you've probably seen enough about the BIOS, and you've seen a bit of comparison between the two systems. And you had a look at how Windows 10 looks on the same exact machine. Hopefully you found this video helpful. I want to take a moment to thank you for watching and for visiting tinkertry.com.